Welcome, Lois. How are you?
With a resume?
Resume and email, cell phone. Who's on the chat?
Okay, we got Ebony coming in.
This email?
Aha. Gotta do it.
Oh, you didn't throw your book away.
No. It's right here by my side.
Wonderful.
So it's steps to success. That's the email.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, perfect.
I don't think I like that.
So I think I'm going to start. It's 7:03 tonight. So welcome everybody. This is our second Fireside Chat. I'm your host, Kim Iozzi, Executive Director of Dress for Success Northern New Jersey. And co-hosting with me this evening is Willa Edgerton Chisler, our Steps to Success Coordinator and permanent volunteer.
You can't get rid of me.
Yes, never, never. Tonight's discussion is going to focus on women in the workplace, successes, and of course, challenges that we've all faced, I'm sure, at one time or another. We are very excited this month to chat with two dynamic women that are leaders in their organizations. They have been supportive of our organization as either sponsors or volunteers. I'd like to welcome them. So our first guest is Paula Frank, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist, culture and belonging transformer, and Valerie Egan, Director of Learning and Development. Thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight. This year's Women's History Month theme is Valiant Women of the Vote, refusing to be silent. But before we get into the refusing to be silent part, let's chat for a moment about your career journey. You both have had a very diverse career path. Valerie, I'm going to turn it to you. What was your career journey like?
So I'm in HR now, but it didn't start out in HR. So it kind of took a turn about, I don't know, halfway through. I started in IT right out of college. And then I used to do a lot of college recruiting for programs at Merrill Lynch at the company I was with. And then I liked that and got to know the HR people for a while. So I then was able to transfer into HR at some point. They needed someone to recruit for IT people because they always felt that IT people, you needed to have a good understanding. So that was how I moved into HR. And I stayed with them for about 18 years, which I guess still now it's a long time with a company. And it was really hard because I did a lot with them. I was able to go to school at night and get my MBA. They paid for it. And, but at 18 years, I thought, I did decide at that point that I did want to stay in HR. But I thought that maybe in one company might be a little limiting. And so maybe I could look for another company to, to expand my industry. And so after that, I moved to AT&T, where I started a college recruiting program for AT&T. So I went from financial services to communications. Then I went to an oil and gas company, which was very different. Also, learning a lot, being in a real man's world because sales and most of the people were male. And then downsized from that company, which was a shock after having a career with major companies and having a good career. And then using a lot of my networking, I ended up coming to the Girl Scouts, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But so I stayed within HR, but then moved to nonprofit. So that's how I got to where I am now.
Definitely not a straight path.
So,
Paula, how about you? What was your journey like?
Very similar to Valerie's. And first of all, I want to, first say thank you so much for having me. You know how much I love Dress for Success and Steps for Success. So really am honored to be with everyone tonight. So like Valerie, yes, not a straight path. I've worn so many hats in my career. I started out, my first corporate job was an administrative assistant. I worked for the head of IT at a pharmaceutical company. That taught me an awful lot just about how, just about organization and structure and all of it. And then I moved to recruitment. I started recruiting, at a firm. I did that in an office for a lot of years, and then moved to run my own recruitment sort of on-site practice at a pharmaceutical company. And then I started, I'm really lucky to have had advocates and people that have, just sort of that really has, they've helped me get into different paths. And so I moved into managing IT vendors after doing recruitment for a number of years. And a part of the recruitment work would require me to negotiate contracts. And what I discovered is I loved negotiating contracts. So I started doing that full time, and that was amazing. I started negotiating IT and HR contracts, and did that for about 4 years. And in that role, I was volunteering on our procurement team for our supplier diversity network. And, the person who ran that program, he had left the organization and the position was open. And since I had done so much volunteer work on the supplier diversity side, I interviewed for the role and was successful in getting that role, and did that for about 2 years. I built this, with our team, built this great program. So I've been I'm in diversity right now on the people side of diversity, but I've also been on the supplier side of diversity. So, my career has taken all sorts of shifts, and it's had many, many changes. And what I've just decided to lean into roles that I felt fit my values and just, my passion. And so it took me all over the place, but that's sort of how I navigated and how I'm here today.
Excellent. Well, we're glad you're here today.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you.
What they've really taken the roads less traveled around, right? Of not being an experience in certain areas, and just, as you said, Paula, just lean in.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to sometimes.
So during that time, I'll start with you, Paula, about the challenges that you faced on that journey. And were there any mentors and successes during that period of time that helped you get through? I know when you move around, it can't always be easy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so many challenges as everyone, would experience in their career. I've been really fortunate to have a number of women and men too that have supported me throughout my career. But as I think about 3 women in particular that have mentored me and sponsored me, and there is definitely a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. These women have shown up for me and have spent sort of political capital on me to let senior leaders know that they saw something in me and that I could really do the job. And so even though I've navigated so many spaces, I've been able to do that because of great leaders and sponsors like the 3 women that come to mind. And though their leadership styles are very different, the things that they have in common, they're absolutely results driven. they're genuine, and they're great people leaders. Like, they're great at developing people and leading people and sort of garnering this followership. And then I've had the reverse of that. I've worked in organizations where leaders have not been, they've been more exclusionary, you know, that you could tell who their favorites were, and you could, you know, like they promoted cliques. And in those environments, it's very challenging because, you know, morale gets really low, and, you know, performance suffers and all these things. And what I've noticed about the leaders that I've admired is, when you stand up for your people, when you support your people, when you do the best things for the organizations and you role model those behaviors, people will go above and beyond for you. And so, you know, even though I've had a lot of challenges in my career, you know, being a woman of color, in a lot of rooms being the only woman, and then, again, the only woman of color, it's been difficult navigating spaces. But what has helped me is, you know, just this really strong network of women that have, you know, they've helped me to really, to be able to pivot and to pivot, you know, very strongly into different spaces. So I would say having a strong network is fundamental to career growth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right. What about you, Val? What kind of challenges and successes have you had on your career path, other than having great Girl Scout cookies now, right?
Yes, this is Girl Scout season. Get out there, digital cookie. You can buy them online.
Good. That's good to know.
So I'm going to say, yeah, I've had challenges, and one of my first challenges was really when I worked for AT&T, and they decided to. This was during the time when outsourcing became very popular, and a lot of companies were outsourcing different functions, and they decided to outsource the recruitment function. Now I lucked out a little bit, because at that time it was outsourced to a company, Aon, and they kept a number of employees. So I was kept, and I learned a whole new skill set. I learned how to do due diligence, go through a whole process documentation, and then manage a contract. But it was very scary at the time. And then after a couple of years, AT&T made a decision to take it back in-house. And then they moved their HR staff to Texas. So I had a year to know that, but I had to find another job. So that was very challenging. And I'm going to be honest here. When I think about role models, I didn't have that many. I didn't have a lot of people to help. I'm going to be honest that coming up, I didn't see that much. I did have one person that sticks out, and she was at AT&T, and it took a different role. She was a person who was not, I think she was in sales and wanted to get into HR and did, but she did it through getting herself all involved with SHRM, the society. And she did a lot of things, and she traveled, and she became on their board. So she said to me, Valerie, you know, if you want to really stay with HR, I would suggest looking at organizations and seeing how you can help, seeing what you can do. And, you know, from that, I ended up really listening to her. I got involved with a local chapter. I was working in New Jersey at the time. I ended up getting involved with the Morris County chapter. I took several roles. I was president for several years. When I was outsourced, I became acquainted with an HR outsourcing organization. And, you know, and it's really spending extra time, you know, doing sessions like this, participating in events. I won a couple of awards with them as partnering with my company. And then when I went to found a job with Linde, the oil and gas company, the reason I ended up getting that job was they had their recruitment outsourced, and they were looking for somebody to come in and change vendors. So I stayed with that organization. So my point is that this person really pointed me towards professional organizations that are related to what I was interested in. And I started that. And then I really started to expand that to Dress for Success, that's why I love working with Steps to Success. And I'm hoping that some people on here, somebody maybe, I may end up coaching somebody that's here, because I do have a big background in recruitment and all. But, and I'll tell you, it's funny, and I'm going to be honest here. I work for the Girl Scouts, and a lot of people, it's mostly women. And there are some role models there, but I'll tell you, not a lot. You really have to look for somebody who really has a similar outlook that you have. And then you have to really make that network work, because I don't know if it's all nonprofits. This is the only nonprofit that I work for, but we have limited funds. And so everybody wears a lot of hats and does a lot of things. So people don't always feel like they have a lot of time. So if there's a way that you can work on a project with somebody that you think might be able to help you, or, if you find out that they're involved in an outside organization and you can help and work with them, that's the best way, because I'm finding that now people are so busy. What I do is I've tried in my career to go the other way and mentor people. I've been in both roles. Right now, I'm an individual contributor managing learning and development, but I've had recruiters and other people report to me. I've always tried to mentor them and help them, because I always feel like that would have helped me more while I was coming up. So if there's anything that I can do to sit down, and that's usually my style. Somebody has a question or a problem, it's like, okay, let's sit down and let's kind of do this together. So I try to mentor people from the perspective that I think it would have helped me a little bit more along the way. But I did try to make the best of the organizations other than the company I worked at. And I think that's helped me to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is a lot of mentoring, also shadowing and looking at other people's roles and experiences, having good allies and mentors and sponsors to make sure that you're seen as you're trying to navigate through your careers. But we know that we're in this COVID world right now, and the adverse impact that it's had on women, particularly in the workplace, in trying to navigate this. I know some of my colleagues, and I've talked to many Black women who are facing the furlough, then termination scenarios. They're having challenges trying to balance all that. So I'm going to say, what do we need to do? What does an individual need to do in a new normal? On how do you pivot? How do you move through that? And I'll start it off with Paula.
Yeah, it's a different environment. The global pandemic has forced, Willa, as you mentioned, the stats in December of 2020 to me was just staggering and devastating, that out of 140,000 jobs lost, they were all jobs that women held. So how do we make that's what inequity is all about, like women being forced out of the workforce, either voluntary or involuntary. And you have so many women who are used to working what we call double shifts. They work full time, and then they have to come home and then have all of these caretaking and household duties. And so corporations, if they want to keep top talent, and there are many corporations that are focused on this right now, so that is the good thing. And they're focused and doing things a bit differently. I think they're leading with more empathy. As I think about organizations, that you see in the news a lot lately, they're offering certain benefits for the first time. So, hardship loans and, mental, enhanced mental wellness resources, a bunch of different things. But I think it is more difficult in this environment to navigate. So especially for women of color, as you mentioned, Black women in particular. Those stats that I gave in December, Black women are disproportionately affected. So that's an issue. What I will say is that there are a lot of companies that are absolutely looking for talent and looking for skilled women in the workforce to join their organizations. And with, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives happening right now, I think it's easy to find like who some of those organizations are, because their press releases and they're making it very clear about what the future and what their workforce should look like, and they're trying to diversify and make sure that their workforces reflect all people. And so while it sometimes may feel dire, I think that companies have been awakened with all of the social justice movements and also a global pandemic in terms of how do we support, how do we build a better workforce, and how do we attract talent, and where do we find them? So I think find the companies that are clearly relaying these messages, that they're looking for talent, that they're looking to diversify their workforce, et cetera. Because it's there are many organizations that are getting it right, that are being more empathetic in this time. And I think, align yourself with companies like that.
Okay. All right. Okay. It makes a lot of sense to try to do that and see where the opportunities are. Valerie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say keep in mind that we're in a virtual world right now, and that's something that works to all of the advantage of the person looking for a job. And I say that because it broadens the scope. Right now, a lot of people, we're not sure when we're going to go back to work. I know, with my organization, sure, and they're going to revisit it in May, then they're going to revisit it probably in the fall. What I mean is there's more positions that you could probably apply to, because a lot of the positions are virtual. We've just onboarded the past year. All the people that we've had come on board have not met anybody in person, and everybody's been virtual. Also, it's important to note that along with that, I'll just say something. I hate when that happens. It's just something just like flew out of my head. Talking about how it's easier. One of the things I wanted to tell you was we've had a couple of surveys recently at work, and people don't always take a lot of surveys. It was about employee engagement. One was about the new CEO, but we had a survey about when we come back to the workplace, what do you want to see? 96% of the people filled out that survey, and 80% of the people said they don't want to come back to the office. And so we're looking at changing a lot of our policies. We're looking at if somebody comes in less than 4 days a week, you probably won't have a set cube or space. You'll have a shared workspace. And people seem to be okay with that, because we've seen that for a whole year, everybody can work at home. So one of the things I would say is make sure you get really comfortable with Zoom and Teams or any other kind of online systems to get in. Do like we did today, get in early ahead of time, have backup. I was laughing at Willa because she has another backup set up down there for her if she goes out, because it shows everybody that you're savvy, and it's a way for you to make sure that you can connect, because these are things that you need to be able to do now. You need to be able to do some of these things by yourself. So I think that that's something that's positive, that's going to work in your favor.
Okay.
So I would do those two things now.
Thank you. All right.
So guys, even before the COVID outbreak, our organization has seen a dramatic increase in the number of clients that are 50 plus that have been downsized, and that are struggling to gain entry back into the workforce. What advice do you have for women who may feel as though they're victims of ageism? How can you get out in front of that perceived bias? Is it out there? I mean, what can we do for the women that we're serving that find themselves in this spot? Val, I'll start with you.
Okay. And that's a good point. I remember a couple of years ago being really upset when I got my first ARP magazine. Like, oh my God, I have this now, but they have really good articles. And I was looking the other day in preparation, and it said, according to an ARP survey, 2 in 3 older employees, and they're saying 45 to 74, have seen or experienced ageism at work. And 92% of the respondents believe that this is very common. Also, just to note, on the other end, it also said that some younger workers can also experience ageism, because in another survey, some employers were hesitant to hire the younger people because they think that maybe their work ethic is not as strong as an older person, and things like that. So again, I think it goes back to putting yourself out there, putting your best self out there. Just because you're on a virtual call doesn't mean you have to have your hair all messed up, or, you don't have to put makeup on. I laugh. I mean, I put makeup on today, for this. You put it on when you need to. You make sure that you are still the way. Think about if you went to an interview. The only thing different today for me is that I don't have the skirt on that goes with my jacket and my top, right? But I have everything else on. I think, you have to go in there thinking that I'm going to show them what I have. I'm going to show them my background, and I'm going to show that I'm like I said, I'm savvy with this type of technology. I would do my homework. I would still do my homework, because that's something that even if you do interview in person, I think sometimes people still forget that they find a job and then they go on it, but they don't do any research, and they don't have a background, and they don't have a good reason for why they want to work at a company. So it's still important to do a little research and understand why. And now you can really look up a lot of things about, like as Paula was saying before, what the company stands for. Are they a green company? And is that something that you believe in? So it shows that there are other things. Can you find out that they have, we call them employee engagement groups, but affinity groups? And is that a company that you want to work at? Because you want to join a company, do a good job, but you also want to feel like you belong. So you want to participate in an all-women's organization, a group, or a Black women's network. So I think that making sure that you do your homework, make sure that you're still, putting your best self forward and doing your research is important, no matter what age you are.
Thanks, Val. Paula, anything to add?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that Valerie said. Maybe I'll just add one thing, which is the power of rebranding, right? And I feel like when you're out looking for a job, if you're over 50, and as Valerie mentioned, ageism happens on the opposite spectrum as well with younger workers. But I would say if you're over 50, you have to own that over 50. You've got to, rebrand and shift your thinking. And ageism, yes, it is very, very real. But there's so many ways to position experiences and transferable skills in a way that will serve you very well. And I think, thinking about it from a stance of power, I have all of these skills. I have all these great experiences. I've built a network. I have, people that I can lean on, people that I can tap to figure things out. So the power of the rebrands is it's so important when you're moving and you're shifting and you're thinking about your next move. And if you're over 50, you gotta own that experience and all the power experience brings to a company. So think about it that way. It's just a slight tweak in thinking, that will have people see you very differently.
So basically be competent in what you're doing and be confident that you are competent.
100%. Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Another follow-up to that is that, even with ageism, as women, we're often the caregivers for our parents, our children, our grandparents, whomever. Women more so than men tend to be the caregivers, but we're also volunteers. For whatever reason, a lot of times women volunteer more often, more frequently than men. We're also community leaders. Look at what you guys do on the side, in addition to everything that you're doing for your career. And I'm hoping you've got some words of wisdom, because I'm struggling with this one. How do you find the balance between the stress and the tension of multitasking and juggling so many things and still being successful? I guess in other words, like, how do you rise and thrive, which is what the theme was of our summit. I will start with Paula.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question because yes, women wear so many hats, and outside of our personal lives, and we're trying to rise and thrive in our careers. And 2020 taught me a really valuable lesson as I was, being a DE&I practitioner in an environment, in a social justice movement last summer, and having to help lead our organization through unprecedented change, and at the same time be able to show up whole, because the stress and it being in a global pandemic, and sort of readjusting to all the things, and all of the change that a pandemic brought. I had to really dig deep. And for me, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm grounded, I'm grounded by, my spirituality and my faith. And so that's a big part for me. And so I had to get really clear about just all the power that brings. And then the other things are really simple for me, like creating boundaries. Like I had to say, I cannot have any meetings before 9 o'clock. And yes, maybe I'll have to work later in the day, but it gives me a chance to meditate, to get my mind ready for the day. It gets, maybe I could get a workout in, because when you do things for yourself, like self-care, you're just able to show up, you're able to show up more powerfully. And I think companies are encouraging that sort of self-care right now, because work and personal life, they're blending in together. I just had, my bedroom is here, my office is here, and so I'm like, okay, I'll work another hour because I don't have to commute. But we really do have to think about the added pressures of being in a virtual environment, and making sure that we take some time just to step outside and take a quick walk, or I use a standing desk because I was sitting so much during the day. So there's so many things that we can do to just make sure we're showing up at work as our best selves, but maybe even more importantly, that we're taking the time to care for ourselves so that we could show up, whole and, and again, like our best selves.
Valerie, would you like to add anything, or?
Sure. I would say that there are two things. And so these are things that I try to do, don't always do, but prioritization. And then don't expect kudos all the time for everything that you do. What I find sometimes that I do is I get involved in a lot of different things because I want to. So even at work, I was the person that helped start the employee engagement groups. So I ended up becoming a leader in one of them. So it's not my regular job, but like this past week, I spent a whole week doing everything for them because some of the other people didn't have time to do it. I saw that at work, we have, Girl Scout troops all across the country. We have some homeless Girl Scout troops, and they were looking for troop leaders. And I went through the training I'm doing SHRM work. I had to actually say to my husband the other day, I said, you know what, I think I'm like looking at too much. I have to make a list of what things I'm doing. And I just, even though it sounds great and I want to do it, I have to really think about, can I do it? I'm going to try to do that maybe later this year, because I find that I can't get involved with that. I love doing steps for success. So I want to do this whenever it comes along. Also, and I want to do, and you have to do it for yourself, so when I do these extra things at work, I don't get a lot of extra, my bosses don't always say, Valerie, that's great that you helped out over there, because they just care about sometimes really, did you do your job? Did you get the learning and development stuff done? So you don't expect that. But then another little thing that I do is, because I just like Paula, I mean, my husband's a phys ed teacher. So when the weather was nice, he was like saying, did you take the dogs out for a walk today? Did you do this? And I'm like, no, he came home at 3 o'clock the other day. I hadn't even gotten up and eaten lunch, because meetings were like 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm trying, when I set up the meeting, to do it maybe for 50 minutes if it's an hour meeting, or, end it, to give you got to give yourself time to go to the bathroom. And that's the thing that, like Paula was saying, because you're home, you end up doing more, or you work through lunch. And so you have to really think about building a little bit, of time in for yourself too. So, and prioritization, that I think is the important thing.
Okay.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I had ever received was to calendar it. And I didn't understand what that meant, but like you said, budget your time, put that in your day. Don't schedule meetings before 9, so you have that time. And I think that is really so important. So thank you both for that.
Yeah. It's Women's History Month. And as Kim said in the beginning, the theme was valiant women of the vote refusing to be silent. So before we turn it over for questions, I'd like to ask this final question around, what does refusing to be silent mean for you, mean for women? We know all the powerful women and what they've said. My favorite is, I'm unbossed and unbought. And if they don't give me a seat at the table, I'm going to bring my own chair. So, Shirley Chisholm is one of my idols. But refusing to be silent now, what does that look like for you? So we'll go to Val, and then we'll close it out with Paula.
Okay. So I thought about this, and I saw some old saying, going back to Egypt, that said, speech is silver, but silence is golden. Parents would say to you, silence is golden, be quiet. That's not good anymore. It doesn't always work. But one thing that I can say is I try to ask myself, because I don't know about you, but lots of times I'm in meetings and I hear people talking just to talk. And, you say, well, they're not even making a point. They just want to hear themselves talk. What I would just say is think before you say something, ask yourself these questions. Will I have to say make a difference? Does engaging this time mean that I will be more or less effective the next time someone asks something? And then how will I see myself in a couple of years if I don't speak up?
Okay.
Will I feel better if I speak up or stay silent? You just made me think about that. I think that might help you to speak up, get your point across, and don't be afraid too, because again, if you think about those people that talk and sometimes they're not making any sense, they just want to hear themselves. You probably have something important to say, and you just are maybe afraid or not used to it. You have to get used to bringing your voice to the table and think, if I don't say it, will I feel bad later? Or will somebody else say the point that you were going to bring up? And then like, that's what I was going to say. That was my.
Oh, yeah. That was my idea. I should have said something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So Paula, what's refusing to be silent for you?
I would say that a great idea can come from anyone. And I think a lot of times as women, much of what Valerie said, but a lot of times as women, we believe that, I think sort of sometimes we're conditioned to be silent, and some of the conditioning can show up as smallness. And, so not sitting at the table, not believing you earned a right to speak up. But when companies are really looking for you to speak up, are really looking for, especially companies that are very innovative, it's really important that they have different perspectives and hear from different people on how to solve the toughest business challenges. So if they don't hear from you, that's a real miss, and it could be a direct miss to the bottom line. So my advice is, listen, say what you have to say, right? And own it, and believe in your voice. And even, in my early career, and sometimes even now, I'll be in a meeting and I'm an introvert. So I tend to process first. Like, I don't necessarily get things out right away, because I'm processing and I'm thinking about how to respond, or, or even if I need to respond. But I would say that early on, it would be like, maybe I'll just not say anything because what I'm saying might be stupid. And, what I started to realize is what I bring to the table is just as important as everyone else's views and perspectives. So it comes with just basically owning who you are and the power of your voice, and making sure that every single time you have an opportunity to contribute, that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I guess now you have given my head a whole lot to think about, even for steps to success now, to start adding some of what you said to our program, because the insights were wonderful. What do you have to say, Kim?
I couldn't agree more. I'm sitting here thinking about how we can add some more programming in.
Absolutely. Are we going to open for questions now?
I believe we are. Thank you, ladies, for your real honesty and insight. And I think we're probably going to have a bunch of questions from our audience. So we will open it up now.
Can I go? Can I go?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Caroline Sayon. I'm the board president for Dress for Success New Jersey, Northern New Jersey. On the last topic that we just talked about, and I have lots of friends based in London with what's going on with Sarah Everard and the protests there. And I would love to hear our speakers' thoughts on, which I think you just talked about a little bit, and we should go further on, is I think women in general have a lot of common experiences that we don't share, and that we need to share more, and that we need to normalize as a group. And it spans the scope of our lives. And how can we all start doing that together to be able to kind of create this larger wave that we're seeing, whether it be ageism, whether it be, sexism, whether it be discrimination at work. What would be advice that you have around that and your personal experience, which you shared a little bit just previously?
Yeah, so is your question around how do we build networks and how do we share information as women in those networks?
I think it's two parts. It's one that I think we're seeing an overflow of people sharing their personal experiences, whether it be violence against women, whether it be, all the other components, which then brings a component of normalization as well as the rebuke, that you feel. And I think as women in general, how can we do better, whether it's networking, mentoring, sponsoring, advising? I think when we come together like we're in an event tonight, we do amazing things and we leave very powerful. How can we kind of amplify that? Or, what's your experience and how that's been successful as you as speakers?
Yeah, well, I'll say in companies that I've worked for that I've seen it done really, really well is there are networks, women in, they're women's networks that are formed to really have a focus on women sharing different experiences. And as you mentioned, violence against women, there's, a lot happening right now with, Asian American, Pacific Islander women. And that is something that for me, this week is, and sort of the refusing to be silent is infuriating. And so how do we use our voices to make sure that people know that we support, communities that are being oppressed and marginalized? That's really important to me. But I think, in a corporate setting, I like to align myself with organizations that have different, that have an outlet for women to get together and talk about pressing issues, but not only talk about them, figure out what we can do together to help be change agents to solve some of these issues. So I would say that, like you mentioned, there's a power when women come together collectively to not only talk about things that are affecting us, our communities, our children, et cetera, but also to be able to solve those things. And even, it just takes a couple of women to do something really, really amazing, as we've seen with many movements. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, and I would just add that an example, something happened today too with our groups at the Girl Scouts. We have this group called GS. Everything starts with GS for Girl Scouts. So GS Mosaic is our group with people with different multi-cultures. And we were having a meeting, and it's only about 50 people that joined that because it's relatively new, but some people felt free enough to talk, and they said, I've heard from my colleagues that some of the Asian Americans are very upset over what's happening and that they haven't heard anything from the Girl Scouts. And we happened to have our chief of staff dial into that meeting, and she was listening. This meeting went on for an hour. I was in the meeting with her later. What happened was she went back to the CEO and the head of HR and told this to them. And I know that the head of HR was thinking about saying something, but she ended up speeding everything up and wrote an email to the whole staff, expressing concern and for the Asian Americans all over and that we have. Now, she was probably going to do it anyway, but this group ended up getting it out there. Now, of course, we still had some people that said, gee, I wish this would have happened 3 days sooner, but she still did this a little faster. And that's because this group got together and talked about it. And then one other thing, we have a group called GS Babies. We have a group that we happen to have a lot of people got pregnant at the same time. And so one of the things this group did was work with our benefits team to, and they ended up changing a vendor and getting some better parental leave policies changed. So that might not have happened if this group didn't get together, and people laughed at first because the first group we had was GS Pride, for all different types of people. And then we had, the Mosaic, and then people were like, babies, what about babies? And they ended up actually causing the best change because they changed some of our benefit policies. And that was just, I think there was a guy in it, but because he was a father, but it was mostly women who had just come back from leave. And they said, I would like to see these changes for, going forward. So it was, again, people getting together, looking for these kinds of groups and talking about these issues and trying to make some kind of change.
Question. Anyone else have anything to add or ask?
They're being shy.
I know. You probably have some more questions. We tried to go easy on you guys tonight.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
These groups within organizations sound amazing, and I love that you had that about the healthcare, because that I have experienced in other organizations that, even people who weren't having children were concerned about that. So having those groups has really been great to hear. Paula or Val, have you felt that having male representation to support females in these movements, or, you know, voice for change of anything, is beneficial, or that it's a hindrance?
It's Val, do you want to go for Valerie? Do you want to go
No, no,
first?
that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so so for me, having men as a part of any movement is a part of any women's movement is incredibly important.
Mhm.
And really, I mean, if you look at data in any organization, in many organizations, I think maybe the Girl Scouts might be a little bit different, but in many organizations, they are, you know, if you look at the data, men are in leadership roles. And so, you know, they have to be a part of the journey in terms of, you know, making change, because they are the influencers in a lot of cases, and you know, who have power and et cetera. So, you know, we started this Men as Allies network to get men involved, because they really wanted to be, they didn't know how to get involved, but they knew that they wanted to be, you know, to help facilitate change. And so I would say that men as allies in any movement as a part of any women's movement is absolutely necessary. And you'll probably see, you know, a lot things happen just a bit more quickly, just given that in a lot of organizations, like I said, men, they hold the, you know, the majority of leadership roles. So imperative that men be a part of the movement for sure.
Yeah, and you're right. It is the the opposite at my company. As a matter of fact, the GS Babies group had changed their name, because when they first came together, they were going to be called GS Moms, and then they realized themselves that they had we had a male take, you know, the first parental leave that we ever had, and so they wanted to make sure that he was included. I would say it's important just to make sure that you have all levels of the organization represented, because sometimes people feel like, oh, it's always the higher levels that are going to be at these meetings, and they're going to talk, and I'm not going to be able to say anything. So we always, you know, make sure that you have representation from every level.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, Michelle, to your point,
Yeah.
when you talked about men, if I may add, I found one of the things that, especially around women's issues, I know my GM, when we had a situation about bringing a women's organization to the group, he said, absolutely, I've got daughters.
Right.
And I want them to be respected in the workplace.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or I want my sons to be good men in the workplace. So diversity and inclusion is about including everybody has a seat at the table.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I found in my past, which is refreshing to hear today in this group, you know, I found in my past that the male leaders were all on board for change, but when it came to being sitting at that table and having those conversations, they're like, oh no, you go and handle it. And so you know, you've got this, you know, that kind of thing. And it was almost as if they were uncomfortable in having that seat at the table, where, you know, they would say, oh, women talk too much and they get off target and all this stuff. And really, we had an agenda. So it's refreshing to see and hear that others feel the same, that it's important to have men as allies, for sure.
Yeah, think about a year ago, we started calling them our manbassadors at Dressing Best.
I love
that name.
I stole that from Bear. I was at an event there, and I would say that the room was a women's event, and it was about 50% male, and I was so impressed. And so I came back and I was like, I love this phrase, manbassador. And so we made all the husbands of every board member our manbassadors at Dress for Success. But it really is important, I think, to get everybody at the table. And, you know, they may be uncomfortable because men, I think, are expected and used to dominating the conversation and those kinds of things. So it may be, you know, almost like a, you know, a reverse mentorship where you're inviting them into the group and saying, you know, join me, come as my guest, and
Right.
you know, making them feel comfortable so that they
Right.
feel safe at that table with all the women, you know, surrounding them.
I also think it's generational.
Yeah.
You know, I was just doing some research on all the different generations and how, you know, I'm a baby boomer, but there's different levels of baby boomer. And then, you know, what's really interesting is we talked about ageism and being 50 and over and owning that, right? But at the same token, millennials now seem to be getting a bad rap. You know, their energy, the way they learn, what was brought into them, but now they're getting a bad rap. And they're almost at that point where, okay, now you're almost considered old because you're 38, 39 years old. Millennials are like pastime, and now it's the next generation.
Yeah.
So I think that for men, you know, I look at my son who, you know, he does the dishes, he's doing cooking, he's right there in there with, he's a partner to his wife, which is wonderful. He was, you know, raised right, and I'm proud of him. But I look at men from earlier and it's like, okay, yeah, let me know when dinner's ready.
But it's a
know?
generational
It's
thing.
a generational
Yeah.
thing of men showing up at that table and having those conversations.
That's
for
a good
sure.
point.
Right, right.
True.
Anybody else? Don't be shy.
Oh, I hate to end it. I've enjoyed it so much.
Exactly.
Well, if there are more questions, you can feel free to email me and or Willa, and we can pass them on to our wonderful guests. I want to thank you guys so much. I so appreciate our conversation and your willingness to discuss all these things and share your experiences with all of us.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Paula, for being, you know, here and, you know, backing up some of the things I said as well. I'm very happy to be here and to partner with you, Paula, and Kim and Willa on this. Thank you.
Right back at you, Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Yes.
all. This is
Thanks,
great.
Kim. Thanks, Willie.
Well,
Thanks,
you know,
everyone.
well, you know, we've
Thank
got a
you.
good one coming up next month.
What's that?
Yay.
The power
We're going to talk about, go ahead, Kim.
it is the power of volunteering is our
Ooh,
Oh,
month. So
Yeah,
that's
we're
a good one.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
going to talk about the spirit of service,
yep.
what that looks like.
Yes.
And our speaker is none other than Caroline. Are you excited,
I'm on the
Caroline?
heights. Yeah, I'm so
We're-
excited. I'm pumped.
You're
Like,
pumped?
bring it on.
We're going to double team you again. We're pumped. Yeah, we've got
We can all put that on our calendar. What's the date for that session?
I think it's the 15th. Oh God, it's tax day.
yeah.
no, it's been moved.
Let me just,
Taxes have been extended to May.
Taxes have been extended, May 17th.
okay, so good. So then you guys can just come on.
So everyone's free.
there.
Everyone's free. Yeah.
Everybody's free.
Nice.
Yeah, so we've got
They did
another.
that. They did that for us.
Yeah, yeah,
So the
we've got
15th at 7
we've got
o'clock.
another good one coming, and then we're going into May with caregivers.
Yep.
Yes, that's a good month for that, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
mothers.
I think that's Mental Health Month, actually. I think.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've got Kim and I have a great lineup set for you.
That's
everybody.
awesome.
Looking
Keep
forward to
doing
it.
great work. Thank you so much for all you do,
Thank
Willa
you.
and Kim. Thank you.
Yes.
We'll
So
see
true.
you soon. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night,
night.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.